Me say, as I've always said, and I will always continue to say, that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. I'm still convinced that non-violence is the most potent weapon available to oppress people in their struggle for freedom and justice. I feel that violence will only create more social problems than they will solve. That in a real sense it is impractical for the Negro to even think of mounting a violent revolution in the United States. So I will continue to condemn riots and continue to say to my brothers and sisters that this is not the way. Continue to affirm that there is another way. But at the same time, it is as necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots. I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. What is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met, and it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
And we are here, and we are live. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The 13%. We are your hosts, Cynthia McDonald and Arthur Ward. Hello, yes. Arthur. How are you?
Fine, Cynthia. How are you today?
I am well. Thank you for asking. And thank you all for joining us for yet another episode so that we can have this conversation entitled The Language of the Unheard. But before we get into our discussion, let's get a little housekeeping out of the way. Please make sure that you like this video, subscribe to YFNA News channel, and hit that bell so that you can get notification every time that we go live. Also, make sure that you share this video on your platforms. I don't know if I said that already, but I'm going to say it again. Share this video on your platforms. Continue to have these particular discussions. And also, if you like the content, consider being a Patreon. We update our Patreons as much as possible for the more that are joining us to support YFNA News. And we thank you all for that. All right. Okay, I think that we got all that out of the way. So again, everyone, thank you for tuning in. So we are going to be discussing this report that came out in 1968, right?
Yes, correct.
I think I'm going to say, yeah, the Kerner report.
68.
The Kerner Commission report that came out in 1968. Actually speaking on this very issue about what they did get right, what they got right, but nobody listened. And I really wanted to have this conversation on the around the anniversary of the March on Washington that happened in 1963. I think that particular March on Washington happened in 1963, 57 years ago.
Yes.
Yes, and then you saw the Black Lives Matter march that actually happened after that. That happened like around this time period. I think that it happened like a Friday. I want to say Friday or Saturday. It was, I believe, it was on the 28th of
Hmm.
August. And shout out to the ADOS people that were actually there, who basically wanted to make sure that the ADOS movement, as far as like what we were discussing and really pushing for reparations and a Black agenda, was actually visible and known, and that we're far beyond talking about just police reform.
Hmm.
All right. So, do we want to go ahead and get into it?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so let me go ahead and get all started real quick. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. I'm hoping you all can see that. All right. So let's go ahead and get into this particular piece. So this article was entitled "The 1968 Kerner Commission Got It Right, but Nobody Listened." Released 50 years ago, the infamous report had found that poverty and institutional racism were driving inner city violence.
Hmm.
And before I get into this, I just want to give a shout out to our sibling show In Black and White, specifically Rick Lockhart of In Black and White, because he actually sent this article to me in the first place. And I was like, ooh, topic.
Hmm.
So we got into that. So it starts: pent up frustrations boiled over in many poor African American neighborhoods during the mid to late 1960s, setting off riots that rampage out of control from block to block, burning, battering, and ransacking properties. Raging crowds created chaos in which some neighborhood residents and law enforcement operatives endured shockingly random injuries or deaths. Many Americans blamed the riots on outside agitators or young Black men who represented the largest or most visible group of rioters. But
Hmm.
in March 1968, the Kerner Commission turned those assumptions upside down, declaring white racism, not Black anger, turned the key that unlocked urban American turmoil.
Right.
Bad policing practices, a flawed justice system, unscrupulous consumer credit practices, poor or inadequate housing, high unemployment, voter suppression, and other culturally embedded forms of racial discrimination all converge to propel violent upheaval on the streets of African American neighborhoods in American cities, north and south, east and west. And as Black unrest unrolls, inadequately trained police officers and National Guard troops entered affected neighborhoods, often worsening the violence. I would like to also point out this was in 1968, not 2020. We'll continue. White society, the presidentially appointed panel reported, is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it. The nation, the Kerner Commission warned, was so divided that the United States was poised to fracture into two radically unequal societies, one Black, one white. The riots represented a different kind of political activism, says William S. Pretzer, the National Museum of African American History and Culture senior curator, commonly sparked by repressive and violent police actions, urban uprisings, and political acts of self defense and racial liberation on a mass public scale. Legislative successes at the federal level with the Civil Rights and Voters' Rights Acts were not reflected in the daily lives of African Americans facing police misconduct, economic inequality, segregated housing, and inferior educations. Black racial violence is not unique in 1960s American culture, Pretzer says. White Southerners set a precedent by viciously attacking freedom riders and other civil rights protesters.
Right.
Again, I like to point out this is again 1968,
All
not
right.
2020.
All right. Let me inform you. It's this misstatement in a couple of places in this article.
Mm,
First of all, when they was talking about when they were mentioning voter suppression in this
mm-hmm,
article, they should have been a little more specific. Because
mm-hmm,
when I was a kid in northeastern and midwestern areas like Chicago, Detroit, wasn't no voter suppression going on there.
mm,
We had uh, hand-picked politicians. That's what we had.
mm-hmm,
The only real voter suppression that was going on at that time was in the South.
mm-hmm,
Okay. Matter of fact, in Chicago, especially, they depended on us to come
mm-hmm.
out. They would bring buses around. People like William Dawson. We had a very active um, um, uh, black captain situation, you know, and ward committeeman situation. They were very, there was no voter suppression going on in northern cities. Okay. But the South was a different story altogether. And as far as like the justice system being flawed, it wasn't flawed. It was working exactly the way it was supposed to work. Okay.
Well, I think
That's
that
why you had the problems.
I think it's more like when you say flawed,
Right.
it's and also too like okay, let me get my words together. Sorry, people. When mentioning flawed,
Hmm.
yes, it's working the way it's designed to work.
Designed to, right.
However, the flaw comes with the way that it works against Black America.
What I'm saying is like the way it was designed was for it to work against Black
Oh yeah.
Americans. So
Oh
it's
no,
not
I
it's not it's
understand that.
not that it's not that the system was flawed. It's just that the system needed to be reevaluated and redesigned. Okay,
Or,
because the way that it worked
or,
was perfect. It was a well, it still is a white supremacist justice system, and it worked exactly the way it was supposed to work.
yeah, well, well, that's what I'm saying is that these and I mean like I mean we're basically just doing apples for oranges when we're talking about flawed, not flawed.
Right.
But we also know very much so how these particular policing practices evolved from
Hmm.
slave patrols,
Sure.
and even if we look at data concerning the disproportionate stop and frisk, killings, incarceration that comes to Black people versus
Hmm.
white people when it comes to the criminal justice system as a whole.
Right.
That's all designed to be very suppressive towards
Hmm.
African Americans, specifically ADOS.
Right.
Because um, for the simple fact of the matter is that a lot of these particular police forces and practices have evolved out of slave patrols.
Hmm.
But let us keep going. Okay. So President Lyndon Johnson constituted the Kerner Commission to identify the genesis of violent 1967 riots that killed 43 in Detroit and 26 in Newark, while causing fewer casualties in 23 other cities. The most recent investigation of rioting had been the McCone Commission, which explored the roots of the 1965 Watts riots and accused riffraff of spurring unrest. Relying on the work of the social scientists, I'm sorry, there's no the there, relying on the work of social scientists and in depth studies of the nation's impoverished Black urban areas, or ghettos as they were often called, the Kerner Commission reached a quite different interpretation about the riot's causes.
Hmm.
In moments of strife, the commission determined fear drove violence through riot torn neighborhoods. During the Detroit mayhem, the city at the time was saturated with fear. The National Guardsmen were afraid. The citizens were afraid. The police were afraid, the reporter said. The commission confirmed that nervous police and National Guardsmen sometimes fired their weapons recklessly after hearing gunshots. Intermittently, they targeted elusive or non existent snipers. assistant snipers, and as National Guardsmen sought the source of the gunmen in one incident, they shot 5 innocent occupants of station wagon, killing one of them. Contrary to some fear-driven beliefs in the white community, the overwhelming number of people killed in Detroit and Newark were African American, and only about 10% of the dead were government employees. Finding the truth behind America's race riots was a quest undertaken not just by the Kerner Commission. In the late 1967, Newsweek produced a large special section reporting on the disturbances and offering possible solutions on racial inequality. So before I go on into their solutions, you want to go ahead and comment on this portion about the city and how it was even saturated with fear?
Yes, well, it was saturated with fear. A whole lot of, I would say, the main cities where this fear was being saturated. That was New York, Newark, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, and they even had people going down to Kansas City. The other thing that was happening at that time too is, like the riots that we're having today with people coming in from faraway places. That wasn't happening then. The people that lived there were doing all the rioting. Okay, it wasn't no imported people coming into these places. And the thing about the report too that I would say blindsided the president was that President Johnson wanted something that would bolster his position with Congress to get certain programs pushed through. The commission did exactly what they wasn't supposed to do. They told the truth.
How dare they?
How dare they? The president picked it up and it was so hot he dropped it. What?
Like, wait a minute, are you actually blaming civil unrest for poverty, pervasive poverty that we actually warranted in these particular urban areas?
Yeah, well, yeah. This was all internal, okay? And, this is actually one of the reasons why President Johnson was trying to get through more civil rights legislation passed, because of the fact that you had growing numbers of Black people that are getting overtly fed up, okay? People like certain nationalists, people in the Black Power movement, the Nation of Islam, a few other folks, they were not helping.
Stokely and them.
Stokely,
Kwame Ture and them.
Kwame, all these guys, they was just talking away, and President Johnson couldn't shut them up. They sent in Martin Luther King to a few of these areas, like when Martin Luther King came to two places. He came to Chicago, and he went to Los Angeles. And both places, everybody treated him with the utmost respect. But they told him that we ain't going for the nonviolence no more. Okay. So, the guys in Los Angeles told Martin Luther King that they was gonna burn down the police station. Now this was in 1968.
Right, not 2020.
Not
Shout out to
2020.
Minneapolis.
These were not white people saying this. These was like Black people. They said we're gonna take this to the Hollywood Hills. We're gonna take this to the white neighborhoods, and we're gonna burn down the police station. And Martin Luther King was like, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to say. All right. But they treated him very well and all that stuff, but they wasn't having it.
Well, he was talking about those particular instances in his book, From Chaos to Community.
Oh, yeah.
When he was, Where Did We Go From Here? From Chaos to Community? And he talked about the Black Power movement in some of his conversations with Stokely Carmichael. And and how he was condemning the Black Power movement in cases because he felt that, and from their own words, that they were more slogan based rather than policy based, and that the slogans were mostly like to stoke unrest and as far as like violence reaction is concerned,
No.
and of course like he was very much so a proponent of non-violence.
Well, see, they're actually that's actually the slogans came out of the violence.
Yeah.
Stokely and them guys, they didn't come up with those slogans.
Mm-hmm.
Those slogans came from the street. The only things that Stokely and them did, they amplified it because they were more well known.
Sure.
But those slogans came from the street,
Mm-hmm.
and it was these guys at the time, them young guys, it was coming up these slogans. At the same time, they was out there busting windows and pulling white people out their cars and whooping ass.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they was doing.
Right. Well, I think that and King was saying when he was speaking with them, I don't necessarily think that they actually took credit for creating the slogans. Like you said, I'm pretty sure that they pulled them from the streets. Mm-hmm. But even as like we watched in the video when he was just basically saying that, rioting is the language of the unheard. Mm-hmm. Look at the bottom, people. This is because of, not addressing the systemic issues that are in these areas. Mm-hmm. You can't condemn violence and condemn rioting and looting and things of that nature if you don't deal with the cancer first. Mm-hmm. Those are just symptoms of the cancer that is already there.
Well, yeah, it's even more than that. The symptoms of the cancer is already there. Mm-hmm. And the thing that you have to understand is this. It's like all the way from 1619 till now, we are on the same trajectory of more and more refined forms of racism, white supremacy being enacted. Okay, it hasn't stopped. We haven't had any breaks. It's just been a continuous, uninterrupted refining of the same crap. Okay, and just like you had during slavery, slave uprisings, slaves snapping on their masters and cutting their throats at the dinner table, or in their sleep, which is what they were supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. What's the difference when you have an uprising, when you got a George Floyd, who is a certain kind of person? There was no virtue about George Floyd, but he just happened to be the symbolic entity that broke the camel's back when it came to police brutality.
Correct.
You understand what I'm saying? So it was already there. We just needed some George Floyd. Let's do this. Let's do it.
Yeah, like I was listening to I remember when Candace Owens was doing her remarks on George Floyd, and she was remarking that people were trying to say that he was a saint or an angel and all this stuff, and then started pointing out, criminal records, which normally this is always what happens. Every time like a Black person gets killed by police, specifically a Black man gets killed by a police officer, the first thing that they like to do is just bring out the record of this particular person. Right. And I mean, like, well, crap, if you even look at like, the criminal justice system and basically the population of people that's actually holding those particular cells, majority of 41% of them are Black men, in the United States.
Right.
Antonio Moore, shout out to him, likes to remark that there's more Black men locked up in the United States than all women prisoners on the planet.
Right.
And which makes no sense, especially when you consider that Black men are only 6% of the population of the States. So it's going to be a higher chance, especially in a urban area, that a Black man is going to have some type of record. I mean, if you just by data alone, and also by conditions as well, if you want to put both of those things together.
Right.
But regardless of any of that, that does not give any person the right to use excessive force. It doesn't, and it definitely does not give them the right to take a life away.
Well, at least for is not the job of the police. It
It's
is the
not the
job of
job.
the police to arrest people and
Right.
or cite people. It's not
Right.
the job of the police to carry out sentences.
Correct. Exactly. We find more and more in these particular instances capital punishment being handed down by police officers instead of by sentencing judges. So let's go ahead and go back to the report. We're going to go into some of the solutions that they were referring to. Okay. So a copy of that issues resides in the collections of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. The magazine graphically powerful cover depicts two raised African American hands, one that forms a black fist of power and the other is a hand slightly curled. Perhaps Pretzer said the hand is reaching for the American dream or on its way to closing another fist. It was deliberately ambiguous, he states. In addition, the cover bears the headline, "The Negro in America, What Must Be Done." This seems to characterize African Americans as nothing more than a subject to be analyzed and decisions made about and for, Pretzer believes. And here is the cover. The magazine interviewed a city planner who believed, who believed the answer lay in regimented integration.
Nope.
Under his plan, let me finish and then we'll comment. I know you might like, wait, hold on. Under his plan, only a certain number of blacks would be relocated in each suburb so that whites would never feel threatened by their black neighbors. Wow. This would create an integrated society. But would integration be right if it was achieved by once again limiting black options? As Pretzer suggests, the magazine exploration of radical change somehow still managed to treat African Americans more like chess pieces than human beings who might want to choose where they live. Now you may comment.
My parents and my grandparents hated the idea of integration. They loved the idea of desegregation, but integration, no. And this is why. First of all, we've already talked about earlier with Yvette and Tone and other programs about redlining, right? In certain areas of different cities and stuff. But see, people forget at that time, if you're black, redlining goes with you, no matter what neighborhood you go into. Okay, that's number one. Number two, why in the hell would I want to live next door to white people who at that time were more overtly unpleasant than they are now, just to have unpleasant conditions put around my house, have my kids being beat up on and denigrated by hundreds of white kids? That wasn't the solution. The solution was to get rid of the redlining. The solution was, in our own, in the areas that we already were living in.
Right.
Some other things.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole thing at that particular time, and I really believe that this is one of the reasons why Dr. King said that I integrated my people into a burning house. Was it a burning house or a burning building?
Burning house.
Burning house. Because for the simple fact of the matter is that you are pushing, people who already have animus against another people to force to cohabitate the same space.
Right.
Instead of really addressing the issues that are within the space that they're in right now.
Right.
And again, it goes back to making sure instead of, saying, okay, well, we're just going to move black people in with white people. But, why would it's kind of like this. If you would ask yourself this question: why would I want to live next door to a person that hates me?
Right.
And there's nothing that I can do to change exactly what they hate about me.
Right.
I was having this conversation with my boss last week, and I was telling them that, you know, uh, especially after what happened with Jacob Blake, I said, I get to the point where I get tired of turning on the news. And it's not like that, if you look at like the nightly news, or like, some of the big networks and things, and they reporting on this. But now that we're so connected through social media and other different platforms and the internet, that oftentimes these news stories come at us. And it's kind of like, okay, so which black man is about to be killed by police next week? And how we're going to respond again the following week. It's a constant thing. And it's to the point where you have to understand, or even realize, that all these different things that's coming at you, even just by what you are noticing by your eyes, is that there's a consequence always associated to blackness.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, a lot of other groups, and I even talked about this in an article, my most recent article I wrote, about how, and during Prohibition time, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bore you, sweetie. but but during Prohibition time, the people who were demonized during that time period were the Irish, the Jewish, the Italian, and the Polish.
Mm-hmm.
And you even had these signs that said Irish need not apply. And then you have like different tropes that were like, put on Italians. However, as time went on, they were able to access whiteness.
Right.
Some were even accessing whiteness by shedding their cultural heritage just so that they can pass as white. So like in some cases, like Jewish people changed their last names. Italian people did it too. Irish people did it too. Matter of fact, I was watching a documentary on Frank Sinatra, and how he grew up during the time of Prohibition. No, I'm sorry. He grew up in the turn of the century, and he lived through Prohibition. And
Right.
he talked about how his parents, his father specifically, owned a bar. But because they were Italian, he changed the bar name to an Irish name, because that was more acceptable in that neighborhood in order for them to be able to run the business than if it was called Sinatra.
Right.
So there was times when, if you're European descent, even if your ethnicity wasn't a consequence to you, you can still shed part of that ethnicity in order to access whiteness. Black people can't do that.
Well, you know what? I'll put it like this. I don't think I necessarily want to access, how should I say, whiteness. What I want to access is being a normal citizen.
Yeah, that's exactly what whiteness is. It's normalcy.
A normalcy, because I don't really think whiteness or white people are that attractive, really. But
I didn't say all that.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
I didn't say all that.
I really don't. I just want to have all of the normal benefits of being a tax-paying American. That's all. I don't want none of that extra stuff. I don't want to, go to Jack's next door so I can, talk sports and eat barbecue and all that other bullshit. I just want normal access to all the benefits of what me and my lineage paid for in this country. That's what I want.
Yeah, I mean, like, and the thing about it is that it goes back to why I would even consider going to that other neighborhood in the first place. I don't necessarily think it's a whole large contingency of people who just want to live around white people just because, but at the same time, if you, a white neighborhood versus a black neighborhood, even now, I talked about in my article about West Garfield Park and how it is 18% unemployed, 43% live in poverty, 93% Black and non-Hispanic, and basically say that they're ADOS. The majority of them are ADOS. So it's and because like all that poverty is rampant in that area, it also happens to be the most violent portion in that area. So so if you have other people who maybe come up, with their socioeconomic status as far as like income, if they got a new job, they can afford to live in a better place, they're moving mostly just so that they can get the amenities of living normal and not getting shot at every day.
Right. And see, it's like when I was in business, okay, I would move into several different places because I could afford to live there because I wanted the amenities. I wasn't trying to be with my neighbors. You understand what I'm saying? Because I really didn't talk to them. I just, got my nice house, drove my nice car, and went in my nice house and didn't talk to nobody in that neighborhood other than the people that lived in my house. I didn't even know my white neighbor's name. I didn't even know his name until 2 or 3 years later. Seriously.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah. And then I'm going to tell you something else when that happens in neighborhoods like that. How many times have you been Black and moved into a Black neighborhood, maybe bought a house there, and the police will come to your door and introduce themselves?
I would say never.
Never. Okay. Well, it happens in certain white areas in Chicago, because that's what happened to me when I moved into that house. You saw the house. When I moved into that house, okay, the Chicago police came to my door, knocked on it. So I'm saying, like, what the hell? I said, I ain't got no warrants. I'm looking at it, y'all ain't got no warrants? Okay, and I opened the door and they said, well, we just want to welcome you to the neighborhood. And if you are going to be leaving your house for any length of time, they'd let me know where the police station was, let them know, and all this other stuff, just like some small, all-white enclave downstate somewhere. I couldn't believe it. I thought it might have been a joke at first, but it wasn't. But that's how that neighborhood rolled. And since I was the honorary Negro in the area,
okay,
I got the benefit of white protection and stuff, because the white people over there that I did talk with, they found out he's all right.
You're one of the good ones, right?
He's one of the good ones. You know what I'm saying? That kind of shit.
Yeah.
But no Black person should have to be at a special status just to be treated normal as an American. It's bullshit. You know what I mean?
I mean, like, and again, we come back to like this whole thing about going to different areas just to access normalcy. And yet never dealing with the powder keg of where most of us live that has been placed there intentionally. So we can go on with the article. I'm going to skip down just a little bit. Okay, so it says the Newsweek's findings did not go unnoticed, but the Kerner report created considerably more controversy. It rebutted a common critique contrasting the mass of primarily European immigrants who crowded into slums in the early 20th century and African Americans who moved from the rural South to urban centers in the middle of the century. Because most immigrants gradually moved up the American social ladder, some have suggested that harder work would lead African Americans out of poverty and into the middle class. Sound familiar?
Yes.
To the contrary, the commission argued that the crush of, sorry, people, I'm having issues with my mouse. Okay. To the contrary, the commission argued that the crush of immigrants occurred when the boom of industrialization was creating unskilled jobs more quickly than could be filled. African Americans, on the other hand, arrived as industrialization wound down and the supply of unskilled jobs plummeted. Also, racial discrimination limited African Americans' ability to escape from poverty. Moreover, the report deplored a common reaction to riots, arming police officers with more deadly weapons to use in heavily populated urban neighborhoods. Its primary recommendations was a policy which combines ghetto enrichment with programs designed to encourage integration and substantial numbers of Negroes into society outside the ghetto.
Mhm.
Both the Kerner Commission and Newsweek proposed aggressive, I want to highlight this. Both the Kerner Commission and Newsweek proposed aggressive government spending. I want to say that one more again for the people in the back. Propose aggressive government spending to provide equal opportunities for African Americans, and each won prize from African American leaders and white liberals. Even so, the President of the United States was not a fan.
Right. And guess where most of that aggressive spending went?
Mm,
It went to organizations that were run by certain African American leaders and white liberals.
mm. Shout out to the NAACP.
We didn't see none of that money. Yeah,
No.
we didn't see none of that money.
That money, and also remember, we said even when we were talking about the DNC that they were committed to do what?
What'd you say?
Study. Remember when we were talking about the DNC and what they were committed to do was to study.
And more
reparations. And reparations.
And more study.
And more study.
And more study.
And more study. Shout out to the BTP team that talked about I almost said the GS-18 salaries that were attached to
for Narcan and Cobra.
HR40.
Let people know for Narcan and Cobra to study reparations in perpetuity. And then when they finally come to a conclusion, they don't want reparations coming to you. They want all reparations resources going to a special commission that they create and control, by which they can decide what to do with all reparations resources. And guess what they're going to decide to do with that? They're going to send it to their friends in the Caribbeans. You got a lot of Caribbean professionals here that have degrees in which they're able to do more studies and create reports and stuff for very high salaries and more contracts and stuff. And then the white government will be able to say, well, we paid you reparations. Y'all need to holler at Narcan and Cobra. And Narcan and Cobra say, hey, we got this thing under control. Just be cool.
Hashtag fix HR40 or let it burn.
Right.
Okay. All right. So we are going back to the Kerner Commission. Or not. Are we going back to it? Let me see. Okay. Okay. I thought we were going back to it. Okay. Hold on, y'all. Nope. Okay. Let me bring this up. Can you see this again?
I can see it now.
Okay.
You had it up.
All right. Just 1 second. Let me do this correctly. This is technical difficulties. This all comes part and partial with actually doing the work, y'all. Oops. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Keep talking while I go ahead and pull up my screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. Okay, I got it.
You got it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Johnson faced no pressure to respond to Newsweek, but it is rare for a president to offer no public endorsement of a report produced by his own handpicked commission. Still, that's what LBJ did.
Right.
The president had chosen moderate commission members because he believed they would support his programs, seek evidence of outside agitation, and avoid assigning guilt to the very people who make or break national politicians, the white middle class. Shout out to the RNC.
Right.
The report blindsided him. He had suggested that communists, we knew the deal was communist since 1957. That's an inside joke, y'all. Oh my goodness. But
Kennedys knew it.
He knew it. They knew it. He had suggested that communist agitation fired up the riots, and to his dismay, the report disagreed, asserting that the riots were not caused by nor were the consequences of any organized plan or conspiracy. And the commission rejected another common allegation, the charge that irresponsible journalists inflame ghetto neighborhoods.
Yes, that's what inflamed me.
Yeah,
All it took was one article. I read it, I wanted to burn something down, I'll tell you.
Oh, and this was written in 1967. Despite Johnson's feelings, or perhaps because of them, the report became big news. Johnson unit assails whites in Negro riots. Read a headline in the New York Times. Man, I tell you, the New York Times been on president's butts for a long time, huh? Rushed into print by Bantam Books, the 708-page report became a bestseller with 740,000 copies sold in a few weeks. The Times featured a front-page articles about the report every day in the first week following its release. Within a few days, both CBS and NBC aired documentaries about the ties between race and poverty.
Really?
Really?
For what?
Because it was big news.
Every white person in this country knew understood the ties about race and poverty. That's why they kept doing it.
Well, I mean, but this is again goes back to what white dominance or white supremacy was designed for. It's always going to be designed to keep a certain group of people at the top and a certain people at the bottom. Yes. You know, it was always basically to protect the elite class, which happened to be ergo white people, and then also to protect slavery as an institution, which happened to adversely affect Black people. And here we are today. Backlash was immediate. Polls show that 53% of white Americans condemned the claim that racism had caused the riots.
It's a lie.
Right. While 58% of Black Americans agreed with the findings.
Number was too low.
Yeah, well, you know, this was
more like 90%.
Well, I'm just going by what the article says.
Go ahead.
Even before the report, white support for civil rights was waning. In 1964, most Northern whites had backed Johnson's civil rights initiatives, but just 2 years later, polls showed that most Northern whites believed Johnson was pushing too aggressively. White response to the Kerner Commission helped to lay the foundation for the Law and Order campaign that elected Richard Nixon to the presidency later that year. Instead of considering the full weight of white prejudice, Americans endorsed rhetoric that called for arming police officers like soldiers and cracking down on crime in the inner cities. Both the Kerner Commission report and the Newsweek package called for mass government spending. Ultimately, going to the moon was far easier than solving the nation's racial issues. Politically spending billions on space travel was more saleable than striving to correct racial inequality. Since the arrival of the first African slaves in North America in the early 17th century, prejudice, and often supported by law, has succumbed the experience. Circumscribed, my bad, y'all, has circumscribed the experience of African Americans.
Let me tell you something. The reason why we supported the space program in the South was because Johnson sent one of his press secretaries down there and told us that they were going to send all the Negroes to the moon. So naturally, we're going to support that.
We're going to support sending Negroes to the moon. Right. That would solve all racial problems and tensions and rioting.
I mean,
to send Negroes to the moon.
Yeah, they told us they were send not all the Negroes, just the troublemakers. You know what I mean?
Troublemakers.
Just the troublemakers.
But you know, but in all seriousness, you know what's really disheartening?
What?
That, you know, what's really disheartening is that we are still dealing with the same stuff now.
I know. That's why we started the space program back up.
Oh my gosh. Be serious. Be serious. Be serious. I mean, but you know, but the thing about it is that, you know, we still get to the point where like all these, I would oftentimes hear like different people say, oh my goodness, why is this happening? Why is this happening? It's because we never fixed race.
Right.
We never fixed race. And the thing about it is that now you got the DNC, which acknowledges issues, but the solutions that they want to tout, especially when you read Biden's plan, it does nothing to really deal with these issues that are still very much so pervasive in our communities.
Which is intentional. You know, I mean, I will give it to the DNC that they are the, how should I say, the refinement of white supremacy. They're also very good at marketing. They're also good at window dressing, you know. But the unfortunate thing for Biden and Harris is that more and more Black people are becoming more politically aware, and they're simply not going for it. They would rather vote for Trump than vote for Biden. Okay, and it's already happening. I think we talked about. I think was that yesterday we talked about this. That Black support for Trump has gone up by 24%.
Right.
And this is not. This is real.
Yeah.
This is real. I got people that live in my house that voted blue all their lives talking about voting for Trump. My brother told me, he says that, he said, we already told the DNC that we didn't want Kamala and they're going to force us to take her anyway. I tell you what, I'm going to vote for Trump.
And so this is, I wanted to share this really quick, this one article that was written.
Another thing, Cynthia.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you noticed that you haven't seen anybody wearing any kind of T-shirt or hat or even a button that's saying Biden?
Yeah, because his you can't, like, you know, blue and yellow, blue and white and red his head really well. It don't like go really good on like a silk screen shirt. You know, it's bad for fashion. It's bad for fashion. But you know, so recently Biden did say, okay, yeah, we need police reform. But this particular article came out in June of this year. And I believe that his rhetoric even has not changed.
No, it hasn't.
Joe Biden's new police reform plan involves the same old failed measures. Joe Biden's initial response to nationwide protests against police brutality was a bizarre gaffe. While speaking to Black community leaders at a church in Delaware on June 1st, the presumptive, and you know, of course, now we know that he is the nominee, but the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee said police officers should be trained to shoot unarmed people coming at them with a knife or something in the leg rather than the heart. Unsurprisingly, in the 2 weeks since he suggested shooting as a remedy for rampant police shootings, his ideas for how to handle our nation's broken police state haven't gotten any better. As the slogan defund police has gone from fringe left-wing goal to a mainstream political possibility that's already delivered results, Biden has firmly stated his opposition to any variation of this demand. Instead, he has made it, as he made clear in a recent USA Today's op-ed, he actually wants to give more money to police departments in order to enact paltry reforms like body cameras, use of force standards, and hiring more diverse recruits. This in keeping with the former vice president's aversion to bold policy change on so many critical levels or some critical issues. Biden has already said he vetoed Medicare for all if a bill ever reached his desk. His student loan forgiveness proposals aren't comprehensive, and his economic recovery plan for this novel coronavirus pandemic is vague on worker relief, instead for favoring incentives for small business owners. But Biden is a particularly poor figurehead to lead any sort of meaningful change in our country's violent, racist, and corrupt justice system. In fact, he bears some responsibility for the current epidemic of police brutality.
Well, because he's corrupt.
Yeah.
And, he's
Well,
I don't think he's going to win.
Well, the thing about it is this, and I've said it to even some other, moderates and liberals that, are trying to sway me from voting down ballot.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just expect people just to go with this just because of Trump, the boogeyman.
Right.
It's not like that we don't know that Trump is horrible. He's horrible. But why would you give us more of the same as a choice when it comes to November 2020? You remember in 1989, Biden actually ripped the Republicans a new hole for not being tough enough on crime.
Right.
And it was a lot of his policies that actually bred the climate that we are in now.
Right.
He was just basically going along with the same old that has been happening for centuries. So, what do you expect us to do? You're not giving us anything to vote for. It's not at the top of the ticket. You're not. So, to me, it's kind of like, Democratic down ballot, it is.
Yeah. Or Democrat. And for those that might be watching that may not be active ADOS organization members, if you must vote for somebody, I'd rather for you to give it to the Green Party or even to give it to Trump, but definitely don't give it to the Democrats.
Not at the top of the ticket.
Yeah, don't give it to the Democrats because they're going to give it to us. If they get in, they're going to give it to us.
The simple fact of the matter is that, and like Todd Davis, I believe that the question was asked, who is we? I'm speaking specifically Black people that descend from chattel slavery. When you are looking at Biden put out specifically an agenda for African Americans, and it is wanting at best. It does not deal with any of the systemic issues that we are dealing with as a whole. No. There was last year, there was a report that came out that said that, Black Americans are slated to be at zero wealth by 2053. And in actuality, I believe that has been sped up since COVID-19. Especially when you look at right now, I believe that the last time that I checked the labor statistics that, I want to say that, I guess I should just check. I don't want to just speak out of turn, but it's pretty high.
Yeah, but the platform that just to continue on is it definitely takes care of immigrants, DACA, and American Indians.
Well, that's what the platform is about. And then the only thing that they point seriously in our direction is police reform, as if our whole population of Black people are criminals. But the police reform that they talk about and we talked about this on our last show, not this particular past show, but on a past show, was the first time that they even talked about Black people by themselves is about them having the talk with their children about how not to get shot by police.
Right.
Like that's the only thing that really concerns us. Everything else was shoehorned in with, people of color policy.
Mm-hmm.
And people of color policy, again, does not fix race. There is definitely different issues that's going to affect our particular group, because our particular group is the only group that dealt with slavery and Jim Crow.
That's right.
That was not Native Americans. That was not Hispanics. That was not Asians. That was not Southeast Asians.
Mm-hmm.
That was not immigrants even from other predominantly Black countries.
Right.
That was specifically descendants of American chattel slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And we are still dealing with those particular issues as we speak right now. And the thing about it is, and just because I just wanted to highlight, even when we look at all these different riots that's happening in Kenosha, in Minneapolis, in Chicago, in Portland, in New York, all these different places, all these different things, because we never fix race in America. We never fix the consequence of race in America. And because we are never really talking seriously about reforming these very systems that affects Black Americans specifically, we're still going to deal with the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And we're tired of it.
Yes.
So it's time to do something creative. It's time to do something disruptive. And it's time to do something that will say, hey, look at this. You need to make some adjustments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You need to listen.
Yeah.
And you need to follow what your constituency wants.
Mm-hmm.
And not just tell us to our faces that we're nothing but mules. And that's basically what Biden did with his remark about, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. Really?
Yeah.
No, it goes like, if we don't vote for you, you don't get elected. That's how it goes.
The voting.
That's how it goes.
Voting, and it says, that says it all the time. Voting is an exchange, not a gift. If you want my vote, you need to give me something to vote for. And I just wanted to address this. No, sorry, I should have said they, or you said they only gave us Biden. They is a collective people who voted for him in the primaries, but the way you said it, it sounds like conspiracy stuff. Well, Todd, I will say this. Biden was doing very poorly before South Carolina.
Right.
Before South Carolina's primary came up, very much so entrenched Democrats, specifically Representative Clyburn, was able to rally enough of his constituents in order to swing the vote in his particular area, Biden's area. And that and other states happened to acquiesce the same way. And then as we came closer to when we got to the DNC, there was a lot of us constituents that was speaking up and out against Biden. That we did not want him because he has a horrible record. And also the DNC could have not nominated him, but they did. And I understand that a lot of that was driven by votes, but let's be clear. We know that there are oftentimes different representatives from the party that helps actually sway their constituents to a certain person. He was not the only one running. And to be honest with you, and this is not conspiracy stuff, because we saw what happened with Hillary and what happened with Bernie in 2016. The party overheads are very much so involved when it comes to who is going to be running in the fall.
Right.
They're extremely involved. Not to say that we don't have a vote, and I'm not telling people don't vote. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that when you have certain people in certain places and what they are actually and who they're pushing, they could have been way more involved with who was going to get that top ticket versus who didn't. And that's all I'm saying about that. And that's not conspiracy theory. That is not conjecture. That is what it is. And, we are now here, and we are very much so in a very racially charged atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And, I watched the Republican National Convention, and it was, I, I should not be shocked about some of the things that I've seen and heard,
Mm-hmm.
because this is the same rhetoric that this party has been espousing for years.
Right.
But, for a person like Nikki Haley to say that, racism in America doesn't exist.
Right.
And then you start parading all these different Black men to come out and, talk about how wonderful Trump is.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just look at the man's record. Come on now. And then the first lady, she's sitting up there screaming, the best is yet to come. But every time that we even talk about civil unrest and the things of that and what actually causes it, they skated right over it.
Mm.
I mean, what do you expect us to do? What do you expect us to do? I'm just like, oh, wow, what are you giving me to believe in or to vote for?
Mm.
If this is what you are saying, that this is the thing that we should be leaning towards.
Mm.
I mean, I don't. You tell me, Arthur.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Now he's not all bad. I will say this is that Trump had actually introduced a second chance or a second look program for people that are incarcerated, and so far out of the slightly over 1,000 people that were released because of that program, 90% of them were African Americans. Sure. He also approved a second round of funding for HBCUs.
Yes, he did. Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple other things he did too, but he's not totally bad. And
no, not all of his policies are terrible. Right. But I'm mostly looking at yes, his rhetoric is very much so racially charged, and also the way that he handled the COVID-19 pandemic was absolutely abhorrent.
Right.
And and this whole build the wall thing, I'm like, really? I mean, like, as much as I want immigration fixed in America too. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't want billions and billions of dollars to go towards something that is, that's not necessarily going to be helpful to the United States as a whole.
Right. And also, with Kamala in there, Black people will be pushed totally to the side. You think it's bad now, pre-election? A lot of Black people are seeing the writing on the wall, and they're not accepting it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Kamala is one of these people. See, and it's a whole lot of little things that she did too. When she had a gathering, I forgot the city that she's in, she didn't even have seating for her own sorority sisters.
I believe that was that when she was at Howard?
Yeah.
When she was announcing her her presidential run. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then now that she's putting the staff together, the first two people that she hired were Indian Americans, and neither one of these women are sorority sisters.
Yeah. So right. I don't know. Right, okay, sisters. Maybe you may need to go ahead and call Kamala on that too. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, but again, the problem is with any of these people, we hear you. We hear you. Mm-hmm. I mean, Biden, you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. Kamala, I'm not about to sit up here and just say I'm going to do something just for Black people. No, I mean, we hear you.
But then when she got in front of the Jewish Congress, she talked about a bunch of specific things for them. When she was talking about American Indians, she talked about a bunch of specific things for them.
And she's pushing an initiative specifically for Hispanics that she actually announced, and I believe it came out in Miami.
Right. And then when she said, somebody asked her, what's the first thing that you're going to deal with? The first thing out of her mouth was DACA.
Yeah, that was
people that are not even citizens. Okay? So ain't no conspiracy going on. But the only conspiracy that's going on are discussions between Black people that have finally opened their ears and actually listen to what these suckers are saying.
Right. We hear you.
We hear you now.
We hear you.
Okay.
We hear you.
Right.
And the thing about it is, because we hear you and your record is very much so easily accessed, shout out to internet, shout out to Google, you know, it's not going to be very difficult to pull your particular history on how you handle your offices in the past
Right.
and how your policies affected a certain population of people who we happen to belong to.
Right.
Okay, so
You
we
know.
hear you, and the thing about it is, and I know that we're going to you know, wrap up pretty soon.
Okay.
That you know, you know, the Kerner Commission, the Kerner Commission talked about this, that, you know, because again we have not addressed the issues specifically about poverty that is rampant, predominantly Black ADOS communities,
Mm-hmm.
we get rioting. When we are looking at the violence that even happens in primarily ADOS communities in America, specifically in urban areas, poverty is very much so a real thing, and the violence continues. How long are we going to keep saying the same thing until somebody actually gets it and fixes it? And it starts, the fix starts with reparations.
Mm-hmm.
A comprehensive reparations initiative, starting with fixing the racial wealth gap and the poverty that is running rampant in our communities, so that we can actually begin to get access to what normalcy is really about. We gotta have it. We gotta have it. So you have any final thoughts,
Oh no.
dear heart?
No, it's just you know, I you know, it's just that I wish Black people get this conspiracy stuff out of their heads. Most of the time when people are talking conspiracy, it's just that they haven't read the papers. They haven't looked at the polls. They haven't looked at the op-eds that are online as well that you can access with your smartphone. You know, your head is bubbling this way when the trend of everything is going that way. You know, and part of the 13% and other ADOS channels is here to get you straight on the facts and to get some clarity in the way that you're thinking, so that you can start making intelligent decisions in your politics, not sentimental decisions, not decisions based upon what your parents voted on, and not decisions voted based on optics.
Right.
See, because we got fooled by optics with Obama. That's not going to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's all I got to say.
Yeah. Ditto. Ditto. We can't vote emotion. I think that years ago when I was in school, Ricky Smiley came to our college and he did a comedy routine. And at the time, George W. Bush was president. And you know, one of the things that Ricky Smiley said is that, because, you know, one of the things that kind of pushed W, besides crazy, you know, voting and what have you, is you know, the evangelical vote, and a lot of Black evangelicals voted for him. A lot of them did. And Ricky Smiley addressed that. He said, you know, Black people, I need you all to stop voting your beliefs and start voting your pocketbook. And on that note, thank you again for tuning into the 13%. Make sure again that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so every time that we go live and our sibling show goes live in black and white with Ethan Michael and Rick Larkhart. This week, I believe, still special guest host Kendra Pennington will be on. Also, if you like the content, please consider being a Patreon, and also buy us a coffee. All the particular links are in the show notes below. Also, we are still pushing the petition campaign for itshardbeingblack.info. Make sure that you all are signing that petition, sharing that video, sharing that particular link, get more people involved, because we are still pushing for an executive order to be signed by the governor in Illinois to declare violence as a public health crisis and also to create a task force to help release much needed rapid relief in Black communities in Illinois. And on that note, thank you all for watching and have a very good evening.
All of the burning and bombing that was done to us and the houses, nobody never said too much about that, and nothing was done. But let something be burned, by a black man, and then, my God, you see, the flag is drenched with our blood. Because you see, so many of our ancestors was killed because we have never accepted slavery. We had to live on it, but we've never wanted it. So we know that this flag is drenched with our blood. So what the young people are saying now, give us a chance to be young men, respected as a man, as we know this country was built on the black backs of black people across this country. And if we don't have it, you ain't gonna have it either, because we gonna tear it up. That's what they saying. And people ought to understand that. I don't see why they don't understand that. They know what they've done to us. All across this country, they know what they've done to us. This country is desperately sick, and man is on the critical list. I really don't know where we go